your thoughts on Nolan Arenado moving over to the Diamondbacks?
When I look at it, I'm actually not that surprised simply because we know the Diamondbacks were interested in Alex Bregman. We know they were looking for a right-handed hitting corner infielder. And Arenado, from that perspective, makes a lot of sense. So once Bregman went off the board, Arenado to the Diamondbacks heated up, and that is how this came to pass. The one interesting thing about this to me is how much money the Cardinals are paying. It's 31 of the remaining 42 million. Now, some of that is deferred, so the less of a hit to the Cardinals in that respect because they're going to be paying that out and it's deferred money. But at the same time, the Diamondbacks are essentially getting Nolan Arenado for 5 million one year, 6 million the next. In this day and age, that's not very much at all. And the pitcher they gave up was an eighth round pick last year, Jack Martinez out of Arizona State. And he wasn't listed among the Diamondbacks' top 30 prospects. I imagine Chaim Bloom must have liked this kid out of the draft for some reason. So, from the Diamondbacks' perspective, it seems to be a win-win. And the Cardinals, as you guys discussed in the previous segment, this is the route that they're going right now. This is the direction that they're in, rebuilding and trying to put together the next great Cardinals team. It's going to be a few years, but as we've discussed before, this was kind of overdue for them. They kind of held on too long, and now it's going to be a crash, and they understand that, but at the same time, this is the way for them in their minds to move forward.
Ken, what can the Diamondbacks fans expect from Arenado? Because we talked about his numbers and how there's people are questioning whether he's slipped or not. And then the other thing I want to know is, how did the Cardinals finally get Nolan Arenado to agree to a no trade, to waive his no trade? Because he fought it like hell last year, obviously declining it. And now this year he accepted the trade to Arizona.
Well, he obviously wanted out too. And he knew that, listen, at some point he was going to have to be more flexible. And you guys mentioned Katie Woo's tweet. She basically said that Arenado was told by the Cardinals, if you're more flexible, we can be more flexible with the money and let's make this happen. And that seems to be the way this came about. And Arenado did not want to go back to St. Louis. It was a tough place for him to hit. Now, how much better will it be in Arizona? I don't know. Because here's a guy who's been in decline for a couple of years now, offensively. And can he get it back? I don't know. I don't know how much he's lost. So it's going to be really interesting from that perspective to see what Nolan Arenado still has left. Defensively, he's still really good. Maybe not as elite as he once was, but for me, this is a good move for the Diamondbacks. It raises some questions about what's next with them. What do they do with Jordan Lawler? What do they do with Blaze Alexander? Because remember, Ketel Marte is still on the Arizona Diamondbacks. They now have Arenado at third, Perdomo at short, Marte at second. They don't really have much at first base. Pavin Smith is a guy who certainly can contribute there. Do they go out and sign Paul Goldschmidt as well? Because they've been looking for a right-handed hitting first base type. There are a number of those guys still available. So that would be quite interesting if we saw a Goldschmidt-Arenado reunion in Arizona.
Kind of along those lines, you didn't quite hit it for me. What about that money that they possibly could have spent on Bregman? Is this a once-off type of thing when we hear that possibly they are in on Bregman? Is there another player on the market that if they were to make some moves, because they still want their young players to play, like you said, Lawler and Blaze Alexander had a quality year last year. Is that money, do you think that money's still out on the table for Kendrick, the owner?
Not for a player of Bregman's caliber. They are going to do things, and there's not much question about that. They want to upgrade their bullpen. That is the area of focus right now, and it has to be, because if you remember, not only is Corbin Burns recovering from Tommy John surgery, but Justin Martinez and AJ Puck are both recovering from Tommy John as well, and they need help in their bullpen before those guys come back. And with Tommy John returnees, you never know exactly what you're going to get, how long it's going to take them to find their form again. So they're still looking. Are they going to spend the amount of money, Eric, that they would have spent on Bregman? No. But at the same time, they are going to upgrade their roster. They're pretty aggressive about it, as we've seen over the years. And this Arenado move speaks to that.
Ken, you mentioned that they wanted a right-handed hitting, and they're not sure what they're going to do at first base. I'm going to ask this because we've had some questions about Gabby Moreno as a catcher defensively, which that was kind of his thing when he first came up. But last year they ended up with McCann back there a lot more. Would there be some thoughts from the Diamondbacks to maybe move Moreno to a first base position and let him learn there, much like what happened with Wilson Contreras? I know Moreno is much younger and it still has much more upside, but especially defensively. But would that be possibly a thought to help them out if they don't go get somebody?
I have not heard that, AJ. I don't believe that they're willing to give up on Gabriel Moreno as a catcher just yet, but I would imagine teams look at all possibilities. And while this might be what, a 5 to 10% right now, maybe it's something in the future. And if they did that, the problem becomes you've got to go get a catcher. Now, JT Realmuto is still out there. I mean, we're just playing connect the dots here. We're not talking about anything that we know to be serious, but that would be one issue with moving out from Moreno, especially when he was so highly regarded defensively just a couple of years ago. I don't know that he's lost it there. So I would expect that that's not going to be the solution. The way it was described to me, and this was before Arenado, there are a number of right-handed hitting first base DH types out there, and they can go get one of them, probably at a rate that is pretty good.
Based on what's happened the last 2 days, Bregman, now obviously Arenado, much smaller deal. Is Kyle Tucker's decision looming closer, or is there still another chip that needs to fall before Kyle Tucker says, okay, now it's time?
The Kyle Tucker market is active, and Will Salmon of The Athletic reported on this just today, and he said that the Mets seemingly are in the range of 3 years, 120 to 140 million. That is what sources have suggested to him. And if that's the case, and if that is their range, 120 to 140, then the question becomes, okay, will the Blue Jays go beyond that? Will the Dodgers go beyond that? Will the Mets need to raise their offer? So this particular negotiation, the one involving Tucker with all of these clubs, seems to be coming to a head. I would not be surprised if it was this week, next week, sometime soon.
That's it, Ken. Here's my reaction to what you just said. He was supposed to get four. They were talking 400 or 500 million. Now we're talking 3 years, 120. What? What?
That's what the Mets were talking. I don't know if that's what Tucker is talking. Maybe the Blue Jays or Dodgers are willing to go longer. But you raise a good point, AJ, that the Mets, even being at that level, the level that sources have suggested to Will Salmon, shows you that Tucker and the demand for Tucker is not what we thought it would be going into last season. He's coming off 2 injury-marred years. Not his best years because he has had injuries, nothing chronic, nothing that necessarily people need to worry about, but he's had some things happen. And he hasn't had maybe the production that he had in Houston. So, yeah, I don't know that he's going to get 400. I don't know that he was ever going to get 400. Could he get 300 from a team? Is some team willing to step out longer? Of the 3 we've mentioned, I don't know the answer to that is yes. Now, the Blue Jays would seem to me to be the most logical one to go long because they've got Springer and Dalton Varsho, who are free agents after this season. They are going to need to supplement their outfield in some fashion. But at the same time, they've already signed Okamoto. They've done a number of other things in free agency. They seem to be in a mode right now where they're spending and spending rather freely, but all teams have limits. And is a longer-term deal for Tucker where their limit is? I don't know the answer to that, but AJ, you raise a great point. Where is he going to end up when the expectation was so much higher? Now, one other thing, if he does sign one of those shorter deals with opt-outs, he can put together a great year this year and then do what Bregman just did and go out and to the market once again when perhaps he would do better.
Does he need to do that? Is he a guy that needs a prove-it season? He's going to turn 29 here in a couple days. Does he need to prove it? Because we just talked about it yesterday. Teams and agents alike look at the last 3 seasons. He had a OPS plus of 142, 179, injury shortened, I get it, and a 143. Because if he gets this again, like Tucker, like Bregman, like all the guys, Alonso, all the guys. Is this a way that owners are really kind of manipulating one more year of you not using your free agency? Because it's all paid out for all those Boris guys, which you wrote very eloquently in your article.
It's a good question. And I don't know the answer to that, if it's a concerted strategy of clubs to do this. Certainly with Juan Soto, that wasn't a problem. With Willy Adames, it wasn't a problem. Those are the two guys who have signed longer deals in the last couple of years, along with, on the pitching side, Dylan Cease, Max Fried. But with Tucker, it seems, and we don't know the answer yet because we have not seen the market play out to the fullest, but it seems that the demand for him is not what we anticipated it would be. And there are reasons for that. The performance, what happened in Chicago, where he was kind of playing hurt, but he missed some time and it just wasn't great. At the end, the first half was amazing. So it seems to me it's what the market for him is possibly dictating right now. And I say possibly because he may end up 7 years, 300. I don't know what the answer is. But Eric, if we see a pattern like this developing, and it continues to develop where teams are trying to squeeze players to go short, and teams have been successful at this with several players in the last couple of years in free agency, then that question would be fair. But you still have longer terms being given out, just not to maybe all of the players that would have received them in the past.
I mean, right so far, the ones Scott Boras has signed have worked out. Alonso, Snell, Chapman, Montgomery, but he got hurt also. So let's not forget he also had the zipper put on his arm. So he's the one guy, but most of them have worked. Almost all of them for Boras have worked out. What about Bo? Bo has been kind of eerily quiet even after the Bregman thing. I know he had the meeting with the Phillies, and he's had some talks. But where does Bo Bichette fit? Because I think if you start looking at teams now, the Diamondbacks got Arenado to fill their infield hole. Right, so you start slowly losing teams for Bo Bichette. Where does he fit on a team?
AJ, once again, I encourage you to read The Athletic, and I encourage you specifically today to read the story by
Las
Matt
Vegas
Gill.
Athletics?
No, not
Sacramento
the Las Vegas
Athletics.
That's
No,
not
there's no
trademark.
trademark.
The Athletic,
right.
that is the sports publication that I work for. Matt Gill wrote today, it was just published this morning, about this situation with the Phillies and how they seem to have momentum with Bichette, and they are a team that is not afraid to go long with players. They're the exception to what Eric was just talking about. They've got a number of players under longer deals, and it's a separator for them, and it looks like it might be a separator for them with Bichette as well. They'll be willing to go 7 years perhaps for a 28, 29-year-old Bo Bichette, where other teams might not. Now, will Boston react and respond to losing Bregman by going long on Bo Bichette as well? It's possible, but certainly what we've seen from the Red Sox over the last several years is that they don't like these kinds of deals. And the only one they gave out, Devers, was an overcompensation for losing and trading Mookie Betts. So I don't see Boston necessarily doing it. It's possible. They certainly have a need for that player. They had a need for Alex Bregman. And then you ask about other teams. Could the Dodgers jump in? Could the Blue Jays get back in? Maybe. But if the Phillies are the one team, one of perhaps only a handful, if the only one, willing to go long, then I would expect that they're the favorite for Bichette. And they certainly seem to be motivated to do this. They had the meeting yesterday. By all accounts, it went well. These meetings always go well. And it goes beyond that. It goes to a team that wants a younger position player star. They've got some older ones still. And a team that, because they've been unable to sign JT Realmuto, might be willing to reconfigure its roster in different ways with Bichette as part of that. So if they get him, they probably almost certainly trade Alec Bohm, and then we see where they go from there.
This is called Inside Scoop, and you're the ultimate insider. So can you confirm or deny my theory that this was a meeting with the Phillies, that the genesis came from Bo Bichette's camp because of the lack of interest, that the Phillies were like, we're done, and Bo Bichette's camp called and said, we'd love to talk to you guys. And they were like, all right, cool. Anytime you get to talk to an all-star superstar.
I don't know, Eric. And I will say this. That would seem to suggest that theory that the interest was more Bichette's than the Phillies. And that does not seem to be the case. The interest here seems to be mutual. Now, how it all got started, that I'm not sure of. But as we've talked about, and as Matt has written about in The Athletic, the genesis of this is the Phillies' inability to get something done with JT Realmuto and a desire that they kind of had anyway to do things a little bit differently. Remember, they've had a great team for a number of years now, but they haven't gotten quite to where they want to go. And this last elimination was particularly disappointing. And we've heard really for 2 years now they'd like to shake it up. And this is a good way to shake it up, right? If you bring in Bichette and trade Bohm. So to overstate this coming from Bichette, I think would be a mistake. It seems to me to be mutual. And you're right. Teams will always take meetings. I get that. But this late in the offseason, why would either side want to waste either side's time?
True, true. All right, Ken, there was a list we showed, and you mentioned him, JT Realmuto. Everyone, I'm assuming, just thinks he's going to automatically go back to Philly, kind of like what the Bregman thoughts were before he signed with the Cubs. We haven't heard much about him on his market. What's his market like? Because he's been a great player for the Phillies for a while now.
That's a great question, AJ, and I'm not exactly sure what his market is. Now, at one point early in the offseason, the Red Sox met with him, but I don't sense that he is a focus of theirs right now. I might be wrong about that, but I don't get that sense. Then you had other teams that if perhaps they traded their catchers, maybe the Giants, if they would trade Patrick Bailey, then they would be a spot for JT Realmuto, but I haven't seen any indication of that happening either. So you wonder, the question is, if not the Phillies, then where? And I've been asking this question in my head for a while. So has Matt, our Phillies writer, so has other people. And none of us have come up with a good answer. Not to say that there isn't a market. There's always a market for good players. There's someone who's interested, but maybe not interested in the price JT Realmuto wants, because if that was the case, he would have gone by now. And if he's waiting for the Phillies to just finally meet his price, I don't know if that's going to happen at this point. We're sitting here on January 13th and they're talking to Bo Bichette.
Last one. Where do they pivot to if it's not JT? Because there's not anybody on the market that's JT's caliber. Do they make a trade? And is there significant interest in other catchers where teams would be willing to get rid of them?
That's another good question. And Eric, Victor Caratini as a free agent is still out there, probably more of a backup at this point in his career. They've got the other catcher machine, or not him, another catcher, the backup that they have, whose name is escaping me right now.
Marshawn.
They could also trade for a guy like Ryan Jeffers. And there are some catchers who will be available in trade. I'm sure they can do some things along those lines. But to your point, and you guys know this as former catchers, there is a lot of value to JT Realmuto with that staff in particular. He's caught that staff. They're accustomed to him. They like him because he's one of the best catchers in the game. He thinks along with them very well. There's a real connection between JT Realmuto and a number of their pitchers. So if they do not sign him, certainly there is a loss there, no matter who they bring in. But I'm quite certain they would bring in someone else.